Lesson 9.4, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be solving equations algebraically so that I can find the roots of the equation, okay? What a root is it's where my graph is going to touch the x-axis, okay? I can find that by just solving for x. Now, there's one thing about when you can solve algebraically. Your problems will never, ever, ever include bx. Remember yesterday I said every single equation is going to be y equals ax squared plus bx plus c. Well, these equations will actually be able to be solved algebraically. So there won't be a y, and there's not going to be a bx. Okay, and you say, all right, I don't understand what that means. Okay, I'll show you. First of all, before we get started on actually solving equations, I want to talk to you a little bit about the roots. What the roots of the equation are is just where my graph crosses the x-axis, okay? Our x-axis is here. It goes horizontal. And some graphs will have two roots because if you notice, this graph right here crosses, I'll do it in a little bit darker color. This graph crosses the x-axis at two different places. Some graphs will only have one root because this graph right here only touches the x-axis at one place, and some graphs will have no roots at all. Look at this. Does this graph ever touch the x-axis? No. And it's going up, so it never will. Sometimes my graph will look like this. Is it touching the x-axis? No, because it's going down and it never will. So there's three different types of scenarios I can have. I can have an equation with two roots. That means my graph's just going to touch the x-axis at two different places. I can have an equation which will give me one root. That means it will only touch the graph at one place. And I can have an equation with no roots. Okay? Now, you say, that's great. But how do I find out how many roots it has? Because you told us we don't have to graph today, and that is correct. I will show you exactly how you do that, okay? You have equations like this, and what the instructions are going to say, solve the equation algebraically. So that means all I'm trying to do is solve for x. Then tell me how many roots the equation will have. How many answers for x tells me how many roots I will have, okay? So let's start by solving this problem algebraically. All right, I want everybody writing this one down. We have 3x squared equals 27. All I want to do is solve for x. So what would the first step for me be? Divide by 3, exactly, because I'm trying to get that x by itself. So I divide by 3 on both sides, and I get x squared is equal to what? 9. What am I going to do now to solve for 9? Josh? Who can help him out? Emily? Find the square root, because remember, x squared is not by itself. I have to do the square root and the square root. What is the square root of 9?
3.
What kind of 3? Positive and negative. That is where that sign comes in importance. Okay? It is very important that you know that the roots of the equation are positive and negative 3. So how many roots will this equation have? 2, because there's 2 answers. So you would write underneath it 2 roots. Okay? So I know my graph is going to cross my x-axis at positive 3 and negative 3. Now, I don't know the vertex because I'm not going to take the time and plug all that in. You can find it, but I'm not going to make you. I just want you to know that the graph is going to cross the x-axis at positive 3 and negative 3, which gives it 2 roots. Okay? Derek, What would I do on this next equation first to solve for x? Not yet. What do I want to move before I can touch this 1/2? The 10. And how would I move it to the other side? Add 10. Very good. Add 10 to both sides. And I get 1/2 x squared is equal to 10. Now, what am I going to do here? Josh? Oh, yeah, sorry. 18. My fault. Now, what would I do, though? Who can tell me? When you have a fraction. Anna? Flip it. Multiply by the reciprocal. 2 over 1 because that cancels out. You can never, ever, ever divide a fraction. Remember that? We just multiply by the reciprocal. What's the reciprocal of 1/2? 2. So I multiply by 2 on this side. And I get x squared is equal to what? 36. Yes. Okay. If you plug that in your calculator, like I just said, you can never divide by a fraction. However, if you plug it in your calculator understands the rules, and it will then multiply by the reciprocal. So it does it for you. So if you do 18 divided by 1/2, it will give you the correct answer. Okay, technically, though, the rule is you're not allowed, but your calculator knows that. Okay? So x squared is equal to 36. What do I do now? Square root, which cancels this out. And what does x equal? Positive negative 6. How many roots will this have? 2 roots. All right, is everybody writing this down? Everybody needs to be writing this down. Okay. Let's look at this next equation. What would I do first? Minus 2 on both sides. Perfect. Negative x squared is equal to 0. What would I do now? But there's still something in front of the x squared. What is it? Emily? A negative 1. So what do I need to do to move that negative 1? Divide by negative 1 on both sides. And I get x squared is equal to 0. What would I do now? Square root. What is the square root of 0? 0. So how many roots will this problem have? 1. Because the square root of 0 was 0. So I do actually have 1 square root, but 0 is not positive or negative. So I know I have 1 root. Does everybody see how that is different than my 2 roots? Everybody see that? Okay. Last but not least, let's look at this problem here. What should I do first? Jocelyn? Subtract 16. Perfect. I get negative x squared is equal to 16. What would I do now, David Burwell? Divide by negative 1, and I get x squared is equal to negative 16. What would I do now, Josh? Find the square root. Look what happened. Everybody look. What is underneath the square root sign? A negative. Do you ever have any solution to a negative square root? No. So guess what? X has no roots. Does everybody see how you can get 3 different answers? We can have a problem that has 2 roots, and I'm going to find the square root of a certain number. Okay? I can have a problem that only has 1 root. That means that x is going to equal 0. And I can have a problem that has no roots, because that means I'm left with a negative square root. And there is no such thing. Okay? Okay. I'm going to give you some equations before you start this homework that I want you to do on your own. So wait 1 second on this, okay? And I'm going to give you this problem first. I want you to solve this one. All right, I want you to go ahead and solve each of these equations. Okay, so let's solve these. Tell me what you did first, Kyle, on this first problem.
I do minus 25.
Do you want a minus 25?
No.
No.
I divide.
You divide 25. Perfect. And I know that because 25 times x squared. So the opposite of that is division. Then I get, I'm just going to move it right down over here. X squared is equal to 1. What would I do now?
Minus 1.
X is already, it's alone over there, but now what do I need to do?
The square root.
Square root. Very good. And x is equal to
Positive and negative 1.
+1. And how many roots does this have?
2.
2 roots. Okay. All right, now let's do this next one. What would I do to the next problem, Angelica?
What?
This problem right here. What would I do?
Plus 16.
+16 on both sides. X squared is equal to,
Just put it on.
what's negative 16 plus 16?
Oh, it's 0.
0. Do the square root. And x is equal to 0 with how many roots? 1 root. Very good. Okay. And last but not least, I'm going to erase this work here. What would I do on this problem first? Somebody tell me. What would I do on this problem first? Add 15. 2x is equal to negative 30. Then what would, 2x squared. Then what would I do? Divide by 2. X squared is equal to negative 15. So I do the square root. How many roots does x have? None, because it's a negative number. Okay? Go ahead and work on your homework. Make sure you remember. Okay? The instructions say solve it algebraically and check it graphically. You do not have to check it graphically. I just want you to solve it algebraically and tell me how many roots will the equation have, okay?